So, what are you working on?
Well, I just uploaded the Blender, yeah. So, and Quinn was kind enough to show me how to take an image and throw it onto a plane. So the image that you threw me out yesterday, I was planning on an older version of Blender, and I got, I don't know, like a 3.2 or 5.2 version, which is a lot more powerful. So anyways, he was showing me how to take any one of my images, because before I thought in Blender you can only use either an STL or an object file.
Right.
But he taught me to say, no, you can actually put in a JPEG or a PP, a Photoshop file as an image onto the plane. And then from there, you can turn it into an STL or into an object, right? So from what you showed me yesterday in sending me the objects to me, and then I played in Blender and I made all these valleys, in my head, I realized that I can take one of my artworks, which are all in JPEGs, because I didn't have a 3D kind of like a program. Photoshop doesn't allow me to save in object or STL. So I was never really playing with 3D, but this is allowing me to sort of carve out my images and bring them out in a 3D spectrum, where I could save it and then possibly get it printed as a 3D sort of, world of a plastic. Kind of like what you're doing with your stuff.
Well, it's good. And you might have 3D printers at home, and certainly printing objects like that is certainly possible. And then I would make them into copper, because that's just
no problem. Yeah, we'll go half and half.
So yeah, I put the 3D camera on just to kind of capture this moment. That's
sure.
why I'm recording. So what do you think? This is Claude Latour. You have an extensive history in the Indigenous art field. What do you think of this new technology of AI in particular? Maybe not so much NFTs, but how you liking the AI?
It's a real steep learning curve, but not only mentally, but also in the world of ethics and in the world of evolution of myself, and not just myself, but the other Indigenous artists that have been chosen across the country in sort of representing our semiotics of our own particular teachings and our own stories, and then involving a new almost species that's kind of invisible.
That's an interesting word.
So I'm enjoying the improvisations that's happening in this historical time. And I think as a Canadian artist, as an Anishinaabe artist, I appreciate the support of the different agencies, particularly the Canada Council, and also the provincial for supporting the arts and allowing us to sort of identify our culture and push this technology to its boundaries. So we're kind of like in the infinite stage here, and I'm kind of honored to be part of this kind of revolution and evolution of technology, and also of finance, but also just a mind sharing with my other colleagues are kind of inventing on the fly.
Yeah, it's a really neat creative process. And then we're going to go into publishing as non-fungible tokens.
Yes.
And that's something we'll do on the Friday or Saturday. Because really when it comes down to NFTs, if you want to get into computational programming and making product, because that seems to be where NFTs are aligned with, it's just sales and distribution. So as an Indigenous artist, I would facilitate that as being just simply a means of dissemination through these forms. But again, not all of us are commercial artists, and we don't necessarily need to represent our art as an NFT to sell. But it's certainly there as an option.
Yeah. Well, I also think the within that option, I think the potential, is, you have that you can use it for good or you could use it for evil. And basically, it's a tool. And so I kind of see that in the future, especially for the next generation, more of my grandchildren, will be more apt. Number one is the computers become faster, but also as the technology kind of develops. And so I think we have an opportunity to be able to share our own stories, and then allow remote communities to be into rooms and share those rooms. And so, you know, if you were to take an NFT created by a First Nations artist, and you had that on the wall in the background, if they were looking, you know, in a 3D world. And so I kind of look at, you know, the evolution of, let's say, Facebook as a social platform for people to communicate, but there may be a new one that's going to be invented, and we may invent it ourselves.
Right.
But when we have the images to supply, then I think that's the important part, is to have our own voices being heard in the background in this kind of like new world that the next generation is really going to inherit, you know, because it's quite possible that, you know, if we want to, you know, if we aren't able to travel in the future for whatever reason, we can still connect through this resource and still have our kind of environment intact and our stories intact with our own images intact for, you know, for the future to view.
Certainly, COVID and quarantines has certainly enculturated us to that idea of the isolation, but we gathered to using these tools to actually express ourselves so that we can achieve a degree of connection using technology. If by fortune's stance we happen to be isolated as we are now.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where a 3D camera kind of comes into play, because you can actually, with my particular practice, I can put you right here, or in that case where the camera is, in our environment at this moment in time.
Mm-hmm.
So imagine seeing this scene in 20 years from now, and the kids will be like, oh, they're using like laptops,
Right.
not HoloLenses with like implants in your hands or something weird like
Sure.
that. We don't know, but it's certainly fun as we age and have seen the evolution of digital technologies.
Absolutely, yeah.
From I grew up witnessing the birth of the digital age, a personal computer, to what we have now, all the way from the 80s, and it's a wonderful evolution of things.
Yes, it's interesting. You know, looking when we were children, and I'm talking like in the early '60s. I loved buying these flip books, and the flip books had like maybe about 6 different characters, but they were divided into 3. So you could have you could have like a duck wearing rubber boots, or you could have a gorilla wearing rubber boots, and you know, and you kept flicking, you know, and that was the first kind of introduction to image sort of movement, you know. And then, you know, we grew up with 8mm film that lasted many years, you know, even without sound. At least we had the quality. And then all of a sudden, like, I bought my first video camera, or rented it actually from Grenada for like, you know, $60 a month. Yeah, Grenada, and they were on Bank Street in Ottawa. But this was the first time in history where the common person could actually get into capturing images, right? So, and that was video. And then from video, I went to Super VHS. And then from Super VHS, I went to digital. And now from digital, you're going to non-SLR cameras and into, you know, computer chips capturing images and then turning them into 3D or into virtual reality. So I thought my grandmother saw a lot of changes in her 96 years of life, but, you know, just in the last, 20 years, there's been so much change. And I think sometimes it may be to our detriment, because if history is important to be recorded, it means that we have to always keep catching up to it and then re-downloading it. So I have 200 videotapes in my collection that are analog, and I have to spend all that time, if I'm going to save them, to review them and then keep the history alive. And I'm talking interviews from the 90s with Thomas Bianca, with William Commanda, with John Yellow Kidney, you know, Milton Bourne with the Tooth, and these are very historical. And I did the Inuit artists when they were in Ottawa. So you have to keep up. Otherwise, you may think that you recorded history, but in fact, if you don't keep up with the technology, you've
Right.
kind of you've erased it in a way.
And when we have that problem, especially with some of our organizations, with art funding and capacity and legacy, and a lot of work and interviews and those moments in time are kind of lost. So it's important that we try to keep them somehow, if that means transferring to digital, so they remain on the digital landscape. As an anthropologist, you know, you have to think of how the future will look at our generation.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, certainly growing up, we had our opinions of our parents' generation and before, but what about 3 generations from now?
Mm-hmm.
And we've spent a lot of effort on an uphill battle just trying to achieve equity and recognition. And it'd be shamed if that washes away simply because we did not transpose ourselves into the digital realm and appropriately attribute ourselves and describe what it is that we do instead of allowing other people to make assumptions. So, and it's one of the things that I certainly notice in AI, because AI grabs, I guess, everything from a certain time period. And when we type in our phrases, I typed in Native Americans as superheroes fighting Thanos. And what bothered me was not necessarily the depictions itself, but the regionality of what it thought Native Americans were all around the southwestern region in style. And so, I mean, there's a lot of indigenous groups in North America, but that seems to be the one that's most in the media. Is those.
Well, I think it's important to realize, like, we're in the infancy of this level of technology, and I think within the different kind of indigenous communities, it's a stepping stone to give confidence to the next generation that it's possible to learn this technology and then again to use it for our benefit, as opposed against us. And so I think, once this project is over, and it'll never be over actually, this is kind of like this is like our own kind of circle chain instead of a blockchain that's kind of like in a square. This is like, will always be like a chain, I think, in a circle that'll be passed on, and they're going to kind of say, well, if they can do it, then we can do it, and so I think that guidance is there to sort of say that, it's kind of like our own doctors being our own doctors, our own First Nations people being our own lawyers and engineers, and using that to encourage the next generation to say, yeah, we're in, man. Like, we don't, we're not tied to, the stereotypes that we used to be. And I think this is, within our circle, we all have, there's 360 degrees, and we all have our gifts, and we share our gifts. Like I say, whether you're a doctor or a healer or a singer or a drummer, or whether you're a radiologist technician, or you're working in a band office, and we all make it happen for our communities. And I think we're just part of that one 360 degree as artists, as curators, as technological sort of advisors, so it's nice to be here, for the week with everybody, because it's so diverse, and so much talent.
The diversity, and especially the age. You being the oldest of us here, certainly have seen a lot in your years, but we have. All the way down to the 20s. So we've got many generations represented. It's amazing the synergy we've achieved as creators within the past few days.
Very true.
But yeah, I just wanted to thank you for this brief little interview thing, and I might add to it later on.
Sure.
But this is really a test.
Oh, good.
Of this idea I have, because when you're with the camera, it's
hello,
like,
camera.
Yeah, it's like you're sitting there. So if you look at this in your headset later on, you'll remember this moment.
Sure. Yeah.
And it'll always ring more colorful than a single photo.
Yes. Yeah.
And so I'm very interested in that process, and thank you for participating, and looking forward for the next 4 or 5 more days.
I know. Yeah. Wow. Wait till Sunday. What?
Yeah.
But yes, well, it's a great honor, Dave, and we're very fortunate to have your gift with us, because in some ways, I did a piece many years ago, and it was called Digital Shaman, and I think you're in the corner there somewhere. So, Miigwech.
Miigwech to you. Thank you, Claude.